Hi, I'm here today to talk about a problem that I've run into a lot, writing action scenes. I've had a lot of other young authors tell me that they struggle while writing these, and so I think it's something people could use a bit of help on. Now, I don't consider myself a better writer than any of you, or an expert when it comes to this, but I have put a lot of time into this over the years, and I think I have some helpful advice. Now, in almost every book that you've ever read, there are action scenes. Whether it's a chase, fight, or natural disaster, very few of them don't have these scenes. So it's a very essential part of your book. Now, here are a few common problems that almost everyone I've talked to experience. First of all, setup. Then initial reaction, keeping the action flowing and fresh, and finally ending the scene. I've got a few tips that I think can help with each of these. First of all, setup. When you're first beginning an action scene, you need to remember to lay the groundwork for it. Let the reader know where they are, the environment they're in, and what's about to take place. For instance, if it's a fight between a group of gladiators, it's pretty simple to introduce the Colosseum. The majority of people know what this is. But if you're trying to introduce them to a chase scene through the woods, then along a river, and finally out onto rocky ground, it can be a little more difficult. How do you introduce all three stages and still not make it drawn out? Well, there's two ways to do it. What most people do is they try and introduce the new environment as they come to it. But a lot of times what they forget to do is engage the reader from the past scene onto this scene. Because even though, yes, it's all one action scene, you're going to write it differently for each part. What I like to do is I like to break the chase into 3 individual parts. I'm not saying that you write one, then have a chapter break and write the next. I'm just saying you make it very evident to the reader that the circumstances for the first part of this chase are very different from the circumstances for the second part of this chase. In this, what I like to do is I like to introduce each new area separately. So I'm still doing it as I come to it, but I'm breaking it up so they can understand the environment better. One of the most crucial things for writing action scenes, what most people don't understand, is that if the reader does not understand the world they're in, or the area they're in, when you use the environment as part of your action scene, they're not going to follow. It's going to be very bland and they're going to lose interest. Number 2, initial reaction. When a scene begins, you have to make sure people react genuinely. For instance, when somebody is searching for another person and they start getting shot at, they're not going to stop and call out, "Henry, is that you?" They're going to turn and run. Because evidently the person shooting at them either doesn't want them there or they don't know who they are. Another instance is when a flash flood is coming. You read books and people always stand there and they watch houses get torn down and trees ripped up by their roots. Oh, and then they can see a rowboat bobbing around in the midst of it. That never happens. Nobody ever stands that long. There are some people who may go into shock and they stand there, but they never ever are watching that sort of stuff. When you see a flash flood, you turn and run. You don't want to be caught there, and even though, granted, a lot of people are going to realize that they need to find somewhere safe, it's not what most people do. What I do to help me solve this problem is when I'm writing an action scene, I sit down, I close my eyes, and I put myself in the scene. When a flash flood is coming, and my family's in the way, I'm not going to stand there and write a story about what it looks like. I'm going to turn and run. Same thing comes when someone's shooting at me. I don't care who is shooting at me. I don't want a bullet in my head. I'm going to turn and run. You need to make sure that the initial reaction is believable, because a lot of people lose track of their readers because they are trying to make the character's emotions more important than the action. Number 3, keeping the action flowing and fresh. Now you have to remember, action scenes can only contain so much content before they become boring. Now, what happens a lot of times is people try and draw out the scenes by throwing in extra action because this is either the highlight of their book or the highlight of their chapter, and they want it to spend more time on this. Or they try and add emotions into it. Strange things that people say, random conversations that pop up. You need to not do that. For instance, when you're in a car chase trying to escape some pursuing cops, you're not going to start yelling at your companion because he doesn't bring maps in his car. You'll blame him later when you're both in jail. For the time being, though, the emotion there, while maybe a little bit funny, is going to break up your scene. You're going to lose a lot of readers that way. Remember, action scenes aren't always easy to write, but the better you write them, the easier to read. And when you don't try and force extra stuff into there, it's easier to write, and the readers will enjoy it a lot more. Finally, ending the scene. Sometimes writers seem to have a problem with letting an action scene finish at the right time. They try and drag it on, make it too dramatic, or just let it die very suddenly. All three of these things are going to upset your reader. It's okay to have a dramatic end. Like while fighting a gladiator, you take your eyes off of him for a second, and the next minute you find his sword thrust into your body. You can always let the action scene slow down, but you can't just let it end. For instance, now is the best time for this person to reflect on their past experiences, remember their loved ones, and think what's going to happen to them. Don't have him just crumple and die, and don't have him thinking back to mistakes that he made in the fight. None of that's relevant. The only thing that he cares about right now is his life and the people whose lives is going to affect, his loved ones and his family. Of course, we're reading this from his perspective, so we're sure he won't die. But make him human. Make his mistake have a consequence. Then, of course, you still have the gladiator. He's standing up, and as our hero is fading away, you'll see him waiting for the crowd to say whether our hero lives or dies. For another instance is, if a hero is chasing down a criminal, say, when he catches him, have him beat the daylight out of him, explode his rage of fury, just have everything pour out of him. Don't have him just tackle the guy, knock him out, and walk away. I hope that a few of these have been helpful. I know that a lot of people I've talked to have said that these are some of the common problems they run into. That's all I have for now. Remember, people want to love your book, so making the entire thing enjoyable from every page is a must. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again.